Well, with the Islamic insurgency growing in Egypt, what will this mean for stability in the region? Middle East expert Ari Ratner, principal at the Truman Project on National Security and a former President Obama appointee at the U.S. State Department, joins us live now. Thank you so much for coming in for our broadcast today.
Pleasure to be with you.
What was your reaction when you heard that they had been designated the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization? Had this been coming, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's clearly a move that the Egyptian government had been contemplating nearly since they ousted President Morsi several months ago by now. The reality is, I think this is something they've wanted to do for a while, and they've been waiting for the opportunity. So it's not particularly surprising. Nevertheless, it's still a very significant move considering the size of the Muslim Brotherhood and its long history in Egypt, and it has potential very serious implications going forward.
You just heard our report that they had arrested a doctor, someone with ties to Hamas. Was this going to happen anyway? I mean, they're pinning it on the bombing of this police station, but would it have been something else?
I think it's something that the government has wanted to do. It's how they view Egypt. They view that the Muslim Brotherhood is not only against the army and against this government, but really a threat to Egypt. And they were waiting for an excuse. It may have been this particular bombing, but I think with the level of violence, which has been consistent, relatively slow, but nevertheless periodic incidents against the military, against the police force, there was going to be this move taken sooner or later.
Give our viewers around the world an idea of just how large the Muslim Brotherhood actually is.
Well, the Muslim Brotherhood has been in Egypt since 1928. It's difficult to say exactly how many Egyptians are members, but they probably represent about 20, 25, potentially even 30% of the population. In the presidential election, the Muslim Brotherhood candidate, Mohamed Morsi, got 51%, but that was really a coalition victory. But it's clearly one of the most important, if not the most important, political force in Egypt, and will remain so.
So we must realize that this cannot be very popular there, and that this is obviously going to ignite a lot of backlash and actually increase the violence, perhaps.
Well, I think it's important to realize that Egypt is a very polarized society. So certainly among the Brotherhood supporters, this is a very deeply unpopular move. Among many who support the government or who may not be Brotherhood supporters, this may be popular. So I think you'll see it certainly increased polarization with Egypt. It may spur even increased violence, and I think it's a clear danger going forward.
Right, and we think that possibly, or you think possibly, that we may even see factions that break off from the Muslim Brotherhood and then come under a different name. Was this really an answer to the problem?
Well, I don't think it's going to solve Egypt's problems. Egypt is now going on almost 3 years since the revolution. The revolution was caused by a number of deep underlying problems, including a very serious economic crisis, a crisis in political legitimacy, and nothing the new government has done, much like nothing that the Morsi government has done, has addressed those deep underlying crises. In terms of the Brotherhood itself, it's a very hierarchical organization that has now effectively been decapitated. How the younger Brotherhood members respond to that, either individually or collectively, is something that no one can really predict, and you may see splinter factions grow more radical.
And this early on, Ari, is there any way to judge the reaction from bordering countries to this?
Well, I think one of the most significant features of the Middle East right now is that almost every country is in some form of crisis. You see obviously a crisis in Syria, you see a new crisis in Turkey. The government in Egypt has very strong backing from some very key players, particularly Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, and they stand very much against the Muslim Brotherhood and certainly support this activity. But you'll see other governments, the government of Qatar, for instance, more reluctant, as well as the government of Turkey, and almost all governments are now consumed with their own internal situation. So many are watching what's going on in Egypt with a keen interest, considering how important Egypt is, but really concerned with their own domestic situation.
All righty. Ari Ratner, we really appreciate you coming into our CCTV studio today with your perspective from the Truman Project. Thank you so much.